So the reason that I chose to make a vegan ricotta cheese for part 2 of the flavor building class is because A, cheese is delicious and it's often the thing that people miss in plant-based cooking, and B, I think that making a vegan cheese perfectly illustrates the process of building flavor and specifically building plant-based flavor. So cheese has a lot going for it, which is why it tastes so good. It's rich in fat because it's made from milk, and as we know, fat helps carry flavor throughout our palate. That's why adding anything fatty to meals helps them taste so good. It's also often salty, and salt helps enhance flavor of any food. And cheese has a bit of umami to it because it is a fermented product, which just adds another layer of savoriness. So I think that cashews, which I have here soaking in this bowl, are hands down the best ingredient for making vegan cheese. They're very rich in fat, just like any nut, but they're also pretty neutral in flavor, and they have a really soft texture, which when blended up just becomes so creamy, much creamier than most other nuts. The downsides of cashews are that they are pricey and they are a very dense food. So usually when I'm making a cashew sauce or a cashew cheese, I like to dilute it with something a little more water rich, usually some sort of vegetable. We have a zucchini mac and cheese recipe in our first weeknight ebook. I'll put the cover here. So in that recipe, the sauce has cashews in it, but it also has zucchini, which helps fill it out and stretch the cashews, and just makes the sauce a little bit lighter as opposed to if it was made of all cashews. So today, in place of the zucchini in our vegan ricotta, we're going to be using cauliflower, and I think that cauliflower just works so well in ricotta because it has a similar texture when it's blended, like a little bit of that grainy texture, and you know, the color is perfect. So we're gonna start with that now. So first of all, I have some cashews here soaking in my bowl, and you wanna soak cashews for this recipe because we'll be blending it in a food processor. Soaking the cashews just helps soften them up so they blend up more creamy. So today I just soaked the cashews in hot water, which speeds up the soaking process. If you're gonna be soaking them in hot water, soak them for at least 15 minutes, but up to a few hours. You can also soak the cashews in cold water, but they need more soaking time. So I would do at least 2 hours in cold water up to overnight. You can totally soak them overnight. I also have a pot of well-salted water set to a boil for boiling our cauliflower. So let's start breaking this down. So I have a small head of cauliflower here, and you do want to use a small head. A big head would be too much. So I'm just gonna trim off the leaves, and usually when I am roasting cauliflower, I actually like to leave the leaves in and just chop them up a little smaller and roast them, and they come out really delicious, and they often get a little bit crispy and they're really good. So usually there's no reason to get rid of the leaves, but for our ricotta we just want the white cauliflower florets. So I'm gonna compost the leaves this time. And now I'm just gonna break the cauliflower down into little florets. This doesn't need to be too perfect or too serious because we will be blending this in the end in the food processor. You don't have to make these into perfect florets or make them too small or anything like that. So my water is boiling, and I'm gonna go ahead and transfer these cauliflower florets to the water. You could also steam these. That would totally work as well, but today I'm gonna need the boiling water for a few things, and I'm planning on just reusing this same water for everything that we do today. And I'm gonna let that go for about 10 to 15 minutes, or just until the cauliflower feels cooked through, but not too mushy. So meanwhile, I pulled out my food processor, and we're gonna put together all the other ingredients for the ricotta while the cauliflower is boiling. And the reason that I like to use a food processor for this recipe specifically is because it is a ricotta, and traditionally ricotta cheese has a bit of that grainy texture, which is much easier to achieve in a food processor because it doesn't blend things until they're totally creamy. So if I was to do this in a blender, this would give me more of like kind of like a creamy sauce, which is not what I'm looking for, and that's why I'm using the food processor. So I've drained my cashews and I'm gonna add them in here. So the cashews are giving us the main fatty base for the cheese. They are what's gonna make this ricotta taste rich and decadent. Next, I think lemon just works so well with the ricotta because it helps counterbalance the fatty, rich flavors of the nuts with its brightness. And I'm gonna add both juice and zest. So I'm gonna zest this whole lemon into the food processor, and I'm using my microplane grater. So yeah, basically, I think I've talked about this many times on here, but basically anytime I'm using a lemon for its juice, I also like to zest it and add the zest because lemon zest just tastes great in everything. Same goes for lime zest. Just helps add a little bit of that brightness and just a really special flavor. I actually really need a new microplane. I've had this one for years and it's gotten dull, but it still works. Look at all the zest. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that in as well. And then I'm gonna juice this lemon. We're probably not gonna need the juice of this whole thing. I think that would be a little too much. I'm gonna start out with 1 tablespoon and then see how it goes. I think we might end up needing 2. And the lemon is giving us a little bit of acidity to counterbalance the fattiness and to just wake up all the flavors. And this wouldn't be a vegan cheese without some nutritional yeast. So if you've never worked with nutritional yeast before, it's not as scary as it sounds. It's actually really wonderful. It's an inactive yeast and it looks like these yellow flakes, and it just has a really, really savory flavor that's a little bit cheesy. It's super concentrated, salty, it has tons of umami, and it's wonderful for building a depth of flavor in so many vegan dishes and non-vegan dishes too. And I personally don't just use nutritional yeast when I need to build a cheesy flavor. I also just use it whenever I need to make something really, really savory. So I'm gonna add that in. Another ingredient that I think is awesome for building a really rich plant-based flavor is miso. So I'm gonna be using just a white mellow miso today. And the reason that I think it works so well in here is because it's fermented and cheese is fermented. Cheese is fermented milk, right? And miso is fermented soybeans or other beans sometimes. This is just a soybean miso. And it kind of has that similar vibe. It has a fermented vibe, which gives it a lot of umami. It's also salty and a little bit sweet, which cheese is sometimes salty and sweet and umami. So I think that adding just a little bit of miso to things like this just really helps level up that flavor complexity. So I'm gonna add it in. And then since we are going to be adding the cauliflower, and that's more of a watery, starchy type of thing, I really like adding some olive oil and just supplementing a little bit more fat in. And I think that olive oil in general tastes good in ricotta specifically. So just to add a little bit more fat and to make this taste a little more rich like cheese, I'm going to add some olive oil. And that's our cauliflower. It's been about 12 minutes, I think. I'm gonna check it by just pricking it with a knife. So yeah, it's ready. So you can strain that over a colander, or what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna get it out with a slotted spoon. Because like I said earlier, I wanna keep using this water for this whole day. I do this a lot, like sometimes if you're cooking things in water, like vegetables in water, say you're blanching some broccoli rabe for pasta and then you need to cook pasta, you can blanch broccoli rabe in the water and then totally use the same water to cook the pasta, because the water will already be flavored and salted, and it just helps save water, not waste that much water. That being said, this slotted spoon is like totally not big enough. I need to get one of those spiders, which is made specifically for this, but I keep forgetting to get it anytime I'm at a kitchen store. We've got our cauliflower, and I'm gonna add it straight to the food processor. Also gonna add lots of black pepper. You can add it to taste. I like the rule of grinding the pepper until your arm gets tired, and then it's enough. And I'm gonna add salt. And we already have salty ingredients in here. The nutritional yeast is salty, and the miso is salty, but cheese is supposed to be salty. And we have water-rich cauliflower here, so I wouldn't be afraid to add a good amount of salt to have everything properly seasoned. And I'm just gonna blend this up. So you can see that the food processor gets it nice and creamy, but leaves a little bit of that grainy texture, which is exactly what we want for ricotta. And now it's time to taste. That's so good. I'm debating adding in a little bit of lemon, maybe like another ½ tablespoon. And it's pretty salty, but I'm gonna add just a little more and pulse that in. So I think the ricotta is ready. It's so delicious, pretty easy to make, has a whole head of cauliflower in it, which never hurts. And now I'm just gonna show you a very spring-inspired way to serve it, which is on some sourdough toasts with peas and toasted walnuts and mint. Okay, so now let's work on the ingredients for our pea toasts. I have a half of this beautiful sourdough bread. For these kinds of toasts, I like to slice it pretty thick. Just makes it look a little more like you got it in a really fancy restaurant. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop these toasts in my toaster oven. I've got some fresh mint. I just think mint is so springy. It goes so well with peas. So I'm just breaking off the leaves off of the stem because mint stems do tend to be really thick. And I'm just gonna cut the mint into ribbons. To do that, I'm gonna stack the leaves on top of each other like this, and then not too many. And then I'm just gonna roll them up. And then slice. And that will give you nice little mint ribbons. Also really nice to do for basil. Okay, so we've got our ribbons. Next, I've got some toasted walnuts, and I'm just gonna chop those up. You can use other nuts or seeds that you like here. And to toast up the walnuts, I put them on a little baking tray and toasted them at 350 in my toaster for about 5 minutes. If you were to do this in the oven, it would take longer. At 350, it would take around 10 or 12 minutes. You just have to watch the nuts closely because they can burn really quickly. My trick is to always set a timer. If you don't set a timer, you're gonna be doing something else and you're gonna forget and they're gonna burn. Our bread is ready. So now all we have to do is prepare our peas. Peas are a very spring and early summer vegetable. In New England where I live, peas are not quite there yet, so I'm gonna be using good old trusted frozen peas, which are totally good and delicious. If you can get your hands on some fresh peas for this, that would be ideal. Perfect for spring. About a cup. Since these are frozen, we're gonna blanch them real quick, and just to take off a little bit of their raw bite. And I've got the same water here that I used for the cauliflower. It's boiling, and I'm gonna go ahead and drop in the peas. And these don't need much time at all, around 30 seconds. Once the 30 seconds are up, I'm just gonna use my slotted spoon to get the peas out. Actually, I'm gonna strain them. I'm also gonna run the peas under cold water to stop them from cooking, to make sure that they retain their bright green color. So I'm gonna transfer them to a bowl and I'm gonna dress them up a little bit. So I'm gonna drizzle them with just a little bit of olive oil, sprinkle with a little salt. You can do a little pepper, and I have a little more of that lemon juice that I juiced for the ricotta, so I'm gonna drizzle that in for a little brightness and mix that up. Give it a little taste. Perfect. Now we can go ahead and assemble our toasts. So I'm gonna start with a generous layer of the ricotta. Which is gonna give us that delicious creamy base. And we're gonna do the peas. Then we're gonna go in with our walnuts, which are gonna add a little toastiness and nuttiness and crunch. And then last but not least, our mint. I'm gonna transfer the toasts to a nice serving plate. And there you have it, a delicious, beautiful, springy toast with our sneaky cauliflower ricotta. And this ricotta can be used in so many different applications. It can be used in pasta, in salads, in all kinds of bowls, on pizza, anywhere you would normally add actual ricotta. This would work really well in savory applications specifically. I hope that you'll get around to trying that ricotta. Thank you so much for watching. I'm wishing you a beautiful month, and I'll see you next time.